But our second story is a similarly interesting one about longevity no longer increasing.
Yeah.
Headline: Studies finds generations born after 1939 unlikely to reach age 100. This is covered in The Independent. But the research was it was an international collaboration between the Max Planck Institute of Demographic Research, the Institut National d'Études Démographiques, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who we've mentioned on this podcast a couple of times now.
Dope.
And they published their paper in PNAS, which is the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And so people are probably most familiar with longevity as a concept or studies either from the Netflix documentary, The Man Who Thinks He Can Live Forever, which is about this 100 millionaire Brian Johnson.
What is he doing?
So he's getting the best doctors in the world to like give him a regiment. So he's now allegedly like decreased his actual age from his mid 40s, where he's like in his 40s, to the bodily age of a 20-something-year-old, right? That's the like, and so his whole thing is, unless I die in a freak accident, like my body is literally.
Is he one of these guys who like gets blood transfusions?
So I don't want to say specifically.
Yeah, okay.
But the only two angles are either the Brian Johnson story or the idea that all these billionaires are vampires, getting their young employees to give them blood.
Yeah, because that's like a real thing. I saw like news stories about that.
I'm not sure with Brian specifically.
Yeah, maybe Brian Johnson isn't doing that. Okay,
but this is how in the
everyone's
pop culture,
obsessed with it, though.
Right?
Yeah.
Like people want to live longer, all this stuff. It's always been the case over the course of humanity that like as generations go by, we get older. We are able to live longer.
Yeah.
This study is sort of suggesting not anymore.
Not anymore. We might have come to the end of the road with the low-hanging fruits. That's what this thing is suggesting. Okay. So longevity, there's been this thing called the longevity revolution over the past century, right?
Yes.
Life expectancy has been increasing like crazy over the last century. And that has everything to do with advancements in science.
100%.
Right? We've like figured out biology at a nitty-gritty level. We figured out, hey, like sickness actually comes from little tiny pathogens, and we figured out ways to advance public health with vaccines, with antibiotics, with all kinds of like revolutionary technology, medical innovations. We've also had a lot of socioeconomic development. So, you know, in sanitation, in like the eradication of infectious diseases, smallpox is no longer a thing,
right? Which
Which is an incredible thing to think about, dude. Like smallpox doesn't exist.
Which is controversial
in the world,
to like bring up the fact that that's an incredible feat for humanity,
and science and everything. Yes. Dude, like, I mean, and you know, I can't imagine it happening today, which is so sad. Which is so sad because like back when I think it was in the 1980s when, you know, we were at the last stages of eradicating smallpox, and there was just a tiny little bit of smallpox in Africa. Okay. And in the middle of a civil war, both sides decided to have a ceasefire so that health workers could go in, and because there had been a smallpox outbreak there, and health workers could go in and vaccinate everyone there. And then they started fighting each other. It's like just stop fighting for like a few days, give us the time here. And then everyone's like probably like planning how to restart the fighting, but even in the Civil War, they respected the fact that nobody wants smallpox,
right?
All right, like I want to win the Civil War,
right? But
not at the cost of a nation with smallpox. I can't imagine that happening today.
There's no. I mean, a funny story that someone always brings up to me about this is the former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Okay,
I think when he was younger had smallpox.
That's crazy.
And, you know, leader of the Republican Party in the United States for a long period of time, he's been very vocal about the defense of, like, science in this particular isolated use case.
Yeah.
And to your point, imagining any of the current global conflicts going on pausing to do a public health intervention.
No, I can't.
It's hard to envision.
Yeah, it really is.
It's hard to envision.
Yeah.
Which is
It really is sad. But like those are the advancements that got us this longevity revolution, right? Where we had an insanely increasing lifespan, average lifespan. Okay. And one of the things that happened as a consequence was policymakers just took it for granted.
Yep.
Okay. Where, yeah, of course we're going to just keep living longer. right? You look at the trend of like how average life expectancy is increasing, and it looks like a line.
Yep.
And so, like any good high school student, they get 3 data points. They're like, oh, okay, it's just gonna go that way, right? And so, and this paper is really putting that claim to rest. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
A lot of people have been sounding the alarm, though. Okay, because anyone who's reasonable is like, okay, just because it's linear for now doesn't mean it's going to keep staying linear.
100%.
Okay, there's plenty of systems that go linear and then they plateau off.
Yep.
Right. But there's been sort of 2 camps. One camp has been there is kind of an inherent limitation to how long humans can live.
Okay.
Okay. Based on just evolution, mutation rates, the ability of our cells and our organs to keep up.
Yep.
Right. And then there's another camp that's like, well, we could have enough science to circumnavigate
science,
like inherent evolution, right? And just like replace bad cells and do all of this bioengineering to just make us live forever, right? So those are the 2 camps.
This is sort of adjacent to the transhumanism kind of movement, where they're like, there's going to be the symbiosis between all of our science, and stuff, and then that way we'll be able to be beyond. We'll be this next thing that is.
We'll merge with AI or some nonsense, right? And it's like, okay, maybe in like 100 years, right? But not me. I ain't doing that. No, ain't no way, boy.
But these are the 2 camps.
But those are the 2 camps, right? And it's been hard to sort of justify one or the other without hard data. Mm-hmm. And that's what this group is doing from Max Planck, right? The paper that's come out in PNAS, it's sort of taking a very rigorous approach to this problem, okay? Because this problem is a hard problem to get good data and good analysis on, okay? Let me give you a sense of why it's hard. So there's 2 approaches to how we quantify life expectancy, okay? There's the period life expectancy, and then there's the cohort life expectancy, okay? The period life expectancy is the easier one to quantify. It's basically the idea that reflects the average mortality risk in a given year.
Right.
Okay. So it's kind of like saying like, okay, like if a newborn is born now and you say the life expectancy is 80 years, but that's a period life expectancy, what you mean is that like, given the climate right now, this newborn, given the mortality climate right now, this newborn would be expected to live 80 years, right? Given the chances of dying on a random person.
Yep.
Right. But that is a very local in time measure.
Right.
Right. Because if the COVID pandemic happens, that period life expectancy goes down.
Right.
If the Spanish flu happens in 1918, the period life expectancy goes down. But like it's kind of a live metric of life expectancy. Okay. Yep. Then there's something called the cohort life expectancy, which is like saying, okay, the people born in 1950 in that birth cohort, the average lifespan of that individual is 80 years. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's different because that is taking into account this giant time span of 80 in like 1950 plus whatever 80 years.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And in principle, that's really hard to quantify unless everyone has died from 1950.
Right.
Right? Then you take everyone who died from 1950, you average it out, and you say that was the cohort life expectancy.
It can be useful in a retrospective context when you have a generation or cohort that's already
that's already done. That's already done.
But it's not predicted. It's hard. You can't play it forward as like we have a generation that's like halfway.
Yeah.
And so let's like maybe predict these unknowns about the future environment.
Yeah. So you see now the struggle, right? That scientists have in defining a cohort life expectancy of a generation that's still alive.
Yes.
And that's what these guys are trying to forecast.
Okay.
And so the way they did it was really cool. They got 6 different types of models. Mm-hmm. So you know in social science you if you just do like a single model, lots of confounds. You want to do a bunch. That's why I like this paper, right? They were pretty rigorous about it. You do 6 different approaches, and you see if they all give the same answer. Mm-hmm. If they do, then it's a pretty robust finding.
Got it.
Right? On the other hand, if it's a giant spread, that means that the nitty-gritties of the model and the initial data that you put in, that's what's messing it up, right?
Yep.
So they did 6 different models, like the Lee-Carter model, the cohort segmented transformation, age at death model, all of these like different kinds of models. They're basically like fancy data analysis techniques, where what you do is you take a time series of data of different age groups and how they're doing in terms of mortality. And then from that, you project forward and try to get like a sense of, okay, when is the time series going to end? Okay. You try to do this for 6 different things. And what they came up with the same endpoint, which is that this life expectancy is going up, but it's not going to get to 100. It's going to plateau. Okay. To validate it, you might be thinking, okay, well, these are just models, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's nice. To validate it, they forecasted life expectancy for people from 1919 to 1938 who are all dead. Okay. Everyone born in that time period are all dead. So you can take that data, right, as your test data in some sense, right? And be like, okay, I'm going to do the same analysis for this data from people born in 1919 to 1938, and then try to project when they're going to die. And it worked.
And we have the answer for that.
And we have the answer for that because we have the data about when they died.
So we built a sort of predictive model to be able to work for current cohorts that are still alive. And we validated and it worked across 6 models. And then we used a historical cohort where everyone's dead to put it in to see if it mapped onto the actual results we saw from that cohort that's now all.
And it was a little bit off, but not enough to justify what they were seeing
that makes sense.
With the present cohort. And it might be a little bit off because, like, you know, when you're trying to do, like, obviously the environment of the data back then is different from the environment now, right? But then you can make arguments about how off the results should be. And the results should not be that off compared to what we're finding now, which is that this thing is definitely plateauing. Okay?
Yes.
The cooler part of this is they actually did a kind of causation of what is causing this plateau.
Right.
And what's causing this plateau is the fact that we have exhausted all the low-hanging fruits when it comes to longevity of human lifespan.
We've taken all the low branches on the tree for extending life, and we've actualized
them all because young people are now living longer, right? People are dying before the age of 5, but much less. Infant mortality is way down. Okay, people dying before the age of 20 is way down because infectious diseases are way down. Right, like the problems that you have as a young person are no longer the kinds of problems that you used to have before. Okay? Like, because of vaccinations, because of fundamental science, because of all of the advancement that we've been doing over the past century. The hard stuff is now the actual aging. Okay? That's the cancer. That's the Alzheimer's. That's these higher order things that are complex. Notoriously hard because they're no longer agents that are trying to kill you. Okay, they're yourself. That's just like sort of at a cellular level giving up in some sense, right? Like the neurons are sort of dying, and the nervous system in the brain is in some sense deteriorating just because of like time, right? And in cancer cells, it's like the mechanisms that control the growth of cells is sort of giving up, and then now you have these tumors growths, right? So it's a much more complicated problem now, that we haven't really had the kind of progress that we have had in cases like polio and smallpox and all of these other sort of, you know, quote, easier problems. They weren't easy at the time, but now that we've looking in hindsight, it's like, okay, they were all like agents, and now we have these like modular mechanisms to like solve that, right? Oh, just make a vaccine. Coronavirus, like within 6 months we had a vaccine. Easy.
Now we have to solve for our own body trying to kill us over time. And the open-ended issue with this is it's not clear that in the short or midterm that we're going to actually make this sufficient or significant progress that would lead to outcomes that were at the rate of progress that we've seen historically.
Yeah. It doesn't seem that like it's not gonna. We're not making progress at the speed that would like temper this plateau.
You know what this reminds me of? Funny enough, is in technology, there's this markets and cycles are defined by this S curve, right?
Yeah,
where you start with a low rate of change and then you have this explosive growth. And with every technology cycle, eventually it tapers off. Mobile phones is the perfect example, right? We went through years of Apple innovating and doing new things and combining all this stuff. And then all of a sudden everyone catches up. And then we kind of get to the place where we are now, where is a foldable versus
Yeah.
Is that really,
yeah,
or are we now just kind of making things for marketing?
Yeah.
And so this similar idea of sort of the S curves that you see in technology cycles.
It's happening in fundamental science when it comes to biology
when
and
it
health.
comes to this longevity issue, it's like we kind of have reached the end of the first S curve.
Yes.
And so in technology, the idea is S curves move, right? So it's like you first have like vacuum tubes, all this stuff, then you get to microprocessors, then you move to mobile, PC, mobile, etc. The open question is, arguably, we just went through the first, let's say, longevity cycle, S curve cycle.
Yes.
And it's not clear what the second S curve cycle may or may not look like.
Yes.
And whether we can traverse it or not.
Yes, exactly. And like if we get to that S curve, what is the real upper limit, right? Because right now the upper limit, I think the record is 122 years for someone to live. Okay? And is that the real limit? Right? Is it at that point the body's just like, nah.
Right.
Evolution has literally programmed us to be like, no. We're still evolving, right? The human genome has a really high mutation rate compared to like for example, sharks, right? Sharks have like a insanely low mutation rate, which is why their fossils 300 million years ago look exactly the same.
Right.
There's no humans like even 10 million years ago,
right,
that look like us.
Right.
So the mutation rate is really high. On top of that, like, we're incredibly like agile creatures. We're mammals at a high body temperature. So high metabolism. So all of these things sort of like start contributing to tempering an infinite lifespan.
Right. The limits. We have these limits that exist that are fundamental to the existence of our being.
Yeah.
And it is not clear that they are necessarily surmountable by a human manufactured solution.
Yeah.
And in human time spans.
Exactly. Yeah. And what I liked, I guess not what I like about this story, but what concerns me about this story is that I think we need to, again, start taking this very seriously as a policy making substrate. Right. As like now a scientific fact that we have learned and urgently need to act on. Okay.
Because from a policy perspective, there's to extrapolate this. There's huge arguments right now over the debt in the U.S. Being at untenable levels, and one of the biggest line items in that is Social Security.
Yeah.
Right. And it makes assumptions about retirement age and who gets and who cares.
Right.
And what happens if the line of average life expectancy shifts or moves?
Yeah. It's no longer, everybody has made this policy based on
this idea.
An increasing life expectancy forever.
Right.
And now this paper is saying that actually, no, life expectancy has plateaued. We're at the end of the road when it comes to like how old we can get, right? Like all these with pension funds, with social security systems, there was a riot in France, right? The other year when the government tried to raise the retirement age.
Yes.
The reason why they're raising the retirement age is a pretty like simple logic, right? Which is like if people are living longer, then they can work longer.
Yes.
And if they can work longer, we should make them work longer before they get the retirement.
Exactly.
Well, this isn't the case anymore.
Right.
People aren't actually living longer. They're living the same as they were like 10 years ago.
Right.
We're not actually making it better.
Right.
And the worst part about these kinds of policies that sort of raise the retirement age is it actually impacts those of worse socioeconomic background, right? Because the rich people can just retire.
Right.
You could retire at 50. You probably already did.
Right.
It's the poor people that are still going to have to work until like 70 now. Right. And then what? Die at like 72?
Right.
Like,
100. No, it's a really important point about how a lot of this very fundamental science research historically, especially in the United States, has both informed like military and intelligence posture as well as policymaking posture.
That's right, yeah.
And there's just been this disconnect where, for whatever reason, there's no longer the through lines from fundamental research and the insights that are gleaned from that into bleeding into these areas that are in the control of nation states.
Yeah.
In terms of how do you sort of organize society around it.
Yeah.
And this is like a meaningful and important point, because people do still think like, oh yeah, we're just going to live longer than our parents. Much like every other aspect, at least in the US, of life, right? We are less, like the millennials and younger.
Yeah.
We're less well off financially than our parents.
Yeah.
Everything is less affordable than it has been for our parents. And we're the first generation to be less well off than our parents. And so the idea that we're going to also
now live just as long
makes you can kind of see all these things are like aligning.
Yeah, and then when you know our parents' generation retires, the population pyramid is now basically inverted for all of these developing countries where this is true, right?
The Japan problem.
Right? Like it's now there's fewer and fewer young people to support this older population for Social Security.
Exactly.
Turns out, given that population pyramid and the mathematics of just 2 + 2 = 4 and it's never 5, like this might just be a scam. Compound on top of that this idea that like actually the fundamental premise that like the younger generation is going to live longer and so can contribute more to the Social Security pile is now no longer correct. And we need to start asking questions like, is this like there's a fundamental shift now, I think, in my mind, from is this a tenable strategy to is this even a correct way to do business in a developed society? Right. I don't want to sound communist because I swear I am not a communist. Okay. But like at some point you got to start asking questions about fundamental things like the social construct, right? Like is social contract. Sorry.
Yes.
Like, you know, is this true? Like this is the social contract of the post-war era still applicable today?
Right. And the fundamental variables in that equation have changed so drastically. And we're still saying the outcomes are going to be the same, even though all the variables on the other side of the equation are fundamentally very, very different.
Like this is a reality now, and it's like going to catch up with us as we grow older.
This is a really, really important story. I'm sure we're going to come back to the subject of longevity, because I think the nexus you brought up from longevity studies to policy is a really important note, especially when we're seeing not only in, you know, Western, let's say, quote unquote, Western developed nations, but any developed nation, this similar issue of generational friction that arises from 50-year-old to 80-year-old policy conceptions that are based on fundamentals that are now statistically, data-wise, and scientifically are proving to not necessarily be the same, and yet we've not changed any of our posture.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to run into a brick wall at some point, and this is it's a problem.
Yang gang. Sorry.
It's interesting because it does dovetail somewhat to our third story. One aspect we didn't talk about, the factors of longevity that change, is, you know, climate is you know, a big part of that.
It's getting bad.